Well, good morning.
Good morning. Good morning.
I think yesterday we talked about one of my favorite holidays, Christmas. We should talk this morning about my other favorite holiday, which is Halloween. Yeah. Well, it was when I was a kid. When I was a kid, Halloween was absolutely fantastic. The world was a safe place when you were when I was a kid to go out on Halloween. So, we ran out into the dark, into the night on the streets when I was a kid without our parents, and went wherever we wanted to, and knocked on strangers' doors with impunity, and yelled trick or treat, and they would open up the doors and give us loads of candy, and nobody was concerned about the fact that we were eating gobs and gobs of candy. It was absolutely great. And Halloween to me was a very big deal. I wanted to, have a nice costume. I was not into buying costumes. I wanted to make my own costume. And so every year I had to put a lot of thought into what am I going to be this year for Halloween. And one year, for instance, I went as Davy Crockett, which was kind of an obvious choice. And my mother made for me, under my direction, of course. My mother made for me a frontiersman's outfit, So I had all these brown fringed outfit that I was wearing, and I had some moccasins that I put on to wear, and I had a rifle because I had every gun that you could possibly have when you were a kid. In those days, that was also okay. So I had a rifle, and my moccasins and my buckskin outfit. The only thing I didn't have was a coonskin cap. And you can't be Davy Crockett without a coonskin cap. So my grandmother, in a rare moment of generosity, that's another story, she sacrificed her dead weasels. Yeah, when some of you may remember this, but when my grandmother was a young woman, like in the 20s and early part of that century, it was considered the height of fashion to wear these dead weasels around your neck. So you have a couple of dead weasels, and they'd have the little legs on them, and they'd be hanging around her neck with little legs hanging there and little heads, little tails. Yeah, little eyes. Yeah, little beady eyes. And so we took the dead weasels and we cut them up and made them into a cap for me with a little weasel head sticking out right here and a little weasel tail sticking out right here. It looked good. And that was an absolutely great Halloween. Everywhere I went, I knocked on the door, they opened up the door, I said, trick or treat, and people would go nuts, wow, look, it's Davy Crockett, and they would bring me into the house, show me to the rest of the family. I got extra candy, pictures were taken of me. It was good. So the next Halloween, of course, I wanted to do even something more wonderful. And I had to think, what's something that nobody's ever gone as a costume at Halloween? And I put a lot of thought in it, and I suddenly realized what I wanted to be for Halloween. A computer. I was going to be a computer. Now, when I was a kid, computers were not, these things you stick in little satchels, or they weren't this big. They were as big as rooms, and they had great big dials on them and lights flashing everywhere. So what I did was I got a box that covered my whole body, just like that, all the way down to the ground. And I painted it silver so it looked like metal, and I painted all kinds of dials and switches and stuff on the front of it. And it needed to have lights, so I ripped out the lights out of my model train set. They had these little tiny lights in there, and I poked them through the box, through the cardboard from the inside, so they were sticking out in the front. And I attached a battery on the inside with a switch. And so I could open and close the switch and the lights would flash. Pretty cool, huh? Oh, yeah. And I put straps inside the box so that it would sit on my shoulders. I needed to see where I was going, so I cut 2 holes in the box through 2 of the dials so I could see where I was going. And I needed to be able to say trick or treat. And of course, computers didn't talk in those days. And so I made a flap, cardboard flap in the front that was folded down and had a string that came inside. When I pulled the string, the flap opened up and it said on there, trick or treat. And then, of course, I had to be able to get candy. And so I made a chute on the front that I could open from the inside, and I attached a bag inside so I could open up the chute. Yeah, it was absolutely fantastic. I would stand in the bathroom in front of the mirror for 15, 20 minutes at a time, looking through my little holes, flashing my lights, pulling my string, opening and closing my chute. It was absolutely great. I took my costume and put it in the garage and waited for Halloween. Well, Halloween came, and I'm sitting at the table with my parents having dinner. And after a while, my parents looked out and they said, it's starting to get dark. Why don't you go out and trick or treat? And I looked out and I went, no way! I'm not going out till it's completely dark out there, because I wanted everybody to see my lights flashing up and down the street, And so I waited till it was good and dark. Finally, it was, and I was ready to trick or treat. And I went out into the garage and I slipped on my costume. And I tested everything. My lights were flashing perfectly. And my string worked to say trick or treat. My chute was working. And everything was ready. And I walked out of the garage on this great evening. I walked down the driveway. And I walked right off the end of the curb and fell flat on my face in the street. You're laughing. I wasn't laughing. I'm laying in the street in my costume that I'd worked so hard on. It was the best costume. I'm laying in the street. I couldn't see where I was going. It's dark out there. And all I had to look through were these little holes. I couldn't see where I was going. So I crawled out of my costume and I dragged it back to the garage and I flung it into the garage. And I climbed the tree next to the house, and I climbed up to the top of the house, and I sat there on the very roof of the house, the very peak of the house. I sat there and sulked. Sat there staring down into the neighborhood, watching and listening to all the other children running up and down the streets, screaming at each other, knocking on doors, getting candy, showing each other how much they got, and having an absolutely great time. And meanwhile, I was sitting up there on the peak of the house, staring down at him, feeling really sorry for myself, thinking, geez, I don't get Halloween this year. I worked so hard on that costume, and it's worthless. And tomorrow, when all the kids are talking about all the candy they got, I will have nothing, and I'll miss this Halloween forever. And I was feeling pretty sorry for myself. For half an hour, I did a good job on me. And not satisfied with how bad I felt, I thought I would make myself feel even worse. So I started really thinking in detail about all of the work and time I put into making that costume. And I did start to feel really bad. But something happened as I was remembering making that costume. One of the things I remembered was cutting the holes in the cardboard to make holes to look through. And it suddenly struck me, wait a minute. I made that. If I made it, I can change it. And I suddenly knew what to do. I slithered down the roof, down the tree. I went into the garage. I picked up my costume. I got my pocket knife out. And I cut the holes bigger. And I slipped my costume back on. I tried my sign, it worked. I tried my lights, they flashed. I tried my chute, it opened and closed. And very excited now, I walked out of the garage, I walked down the driveway, and I walked right into a light post, bam, and fell over onto the sidewalk. Because I still couldn't see where I was going. But now I knew what to do about it. So I crawled out of my costume and I dragged it back into the garage and I cut nice big holes to look through. I put it on, I tested everything, made sure everything worked fine. And I walked out of my garage, but this time I walked very carefully. I was checking, make sure I could see where I was going. And I could see where I was going. And then life got really good. I started walking down the sidewalk, flashing my lights. Oh, sensation erupted, throughout the neighborhood. Kids all up and down the street are shouting, "Hey, look at him! He's a computer!" And they all come running up, and I'm flashing my lights, and I walk on. "Oh, wow, he's a computer!" Everybody thought it was fantastic. They said, "Flash your lights again, flash your lights again." And sometimes I would, sometimes I wouldn't. Depending on how I felt about it. And I'm walking up and down the street, creating this great sensation. And then I suddenly realized, hey, it's getting really late. I better start trick-or-treating, or I'm not going to get any candy. So I walked up to the first house. I walked up to the door, and I stood in front of the door. And I stood in front of the door. And I stood in front of that door. I stood in front of that door because I had no way to knock on that door. I was completely inside of a box. So I went back home. I got out my knife, and I cut a nice big hole in the side of the box. I went back to the first house, and I walked up to the door, and I stuck my hand out of the hole, and I knocked on the door, and I quickly pulled it back in. And they opened the door, and I flashed my lights, and I pulled my string. Trick or treat. Now, what I want us all to be what we're going to do this morning is, we are together. We're going to go through an array for Lenny that you have in your handouts. That it's a model that I elicited from this friend of mine, this old friend of mine, and we're going to go through it together. And the reason we're going to go through it, there's several reasons to go through it. One reason to go through it is it's a darn good model. I mean, it's just a good model for being able to maintain a diet, to stay on a diet. Another reason that we're going to go through it is that it'll give us another opportunity to make these distinctions stronger and clearer in our understanding. A third reason to go through it, you find it? Right there. Good. A third reason to go through this is that this will give us an opportunity to talk about how some of the patterns that you will find in somebody's model can be applied beyond that particular model. It can be used in other areas of life that have a similar requirements. I can't move this chair. And the fourth reason, and it's the most important reason, and this is what I want us to be doing as we go through this, is it's going to give us an opportunity to develop a richer understanding of how all of these elements of experience that we've captured in our models, how they work together and relate to manifesting this ability. See, what I don't want is for you to approach modeling as, well, I ask these questions and I get these answers and I write them down on a piece of paper and look, there are the words on the paper. I don't actually care about the words. What I care about are what are the experiences that are conveyed by the words and how do they actually relate to, as a system, systematically, how do they relate to manifesting a particular kind of experience or behavior? And that's something that I want us to be putting a lot of our attention on. So, let me tell you a little bit about Lenny and about how he ended up needing to have this. Lenny, one day, before one day, he went through a period of time where he was feeling really bad. You know, he thought he was ill, and then he seemed to get better, and then he got ill again. And all kinds of strange things were happening to him, and he had all of his usual explanations for why they were happening. One day, though, he's walking down the street, and all of a sudden, bam, he hits the sidewalk. And he wakes up in the hospital to find out that he'd fallen into a diabetic coma, and it was a good thing he did when he did, because he was probably a day or two away from dying. His blood sugar was so out of whack. And the doctor explained, okay, you're a type 2 diabetic. You are going to have to take these medications for the rest of your life to control your blood sugar. So, of course, Lenny did start taking that medication. And that was okay for a short while, as a matter of fact, for a few weeks. But Lenny is somebody who doesn't like to take medication. And so, he resented having to do that and started looking for other ways, perhaps, that he could control his blood sugar rather than simply through medication. And he discovered that there was a particular diet that some people had success in controlling their blood sugar levels, diabetics, in using this diet, staying on this diet. So Lenny decided to try it. He did, and was able to give up his medication completely, and has been on this diet. Well, now he's been on this diet for 7 years, 8 years. At the time I modeled him, he'd been on the diet for 4 years. And he stuck with it. Now, it's a very demanding diet. I mean, it's something you got to pay attention to every meal, every day. And he had been doing it at that point for years. And as we know, a lot of people have difficulty staying on diets through time. A week, a month, and then the incidence of people staying on diets plummets right away. And so we thought it would be interesting to model him and find out, what does he do? What makes it possible for him to maintain a diet, to stay on a diet through time? So this is about staying on a diet to control type 2 diabetes. However, as we will talk about, I think you'll find that the structures that he uses to stay on his diet are structures that any of us could use to stay on any kind of diet, and in fact could be used to maintain anything that we had to be committed to through time. For instance, an exercise program or a training program, anything that involves through time development, or you have to maintain something over a long period of time. I think you'll find that the structures that we will find in Lenny will be useful. Okay, so let's find out what he's doing here and talk about it. And as we do this, what I am going to encourage you to do is to try these elements on yourself. That is, for each of you, I would suggest right now, think of something that you want to maintain through time, okay? Or you are trying to maintain through time, or you have tried in the past and weren't able to. Again, it could be an exercise program, a diet. Maybe it's, I don't know, keeping a journal. It could be all kinds of things. Huh? I'm sorry?
Yeah, I think I like to keep a journal, but I got it.
There you go. Okay. So find something like that you can use to test out these elements as we go through them. So as we talk about an element, you can step into your own situation, try that element in your own experience, and find out, how does it affect you? Does it affect you, and if so, in what ways? Okay? All right. So let's start where we always start, with the criterion. So when you ask Lenny, well, Lenny, as you are maintaining this diet, what's important to you, or what are you evaluating? And he said, well, whether or not it's working. Okay, so that was the criterion, is it working? Now, there's something that is significant about that criterion. If you try that criterion on yourself, is this working? What happens? How does that affect your experience? What strikes you as possibly significant about that criterion, just as the form that the label takes, the form that the criterion takes? It's ongoing, exactly, Mike. It's working. He's evaluating, is it working? Not, does it work? Or has it worked? Compare your experience to, does it work or is it working? How does that affect what happens? Stops, right? And the answer could be yes, no. If the answer is no, how do you feel? Crappy, huh? You feel yes, terrific. But if the answer is no, well, it can start to be dispiriting. The answer is yes, that's also another problem. The diet works. What happens then?
So the question is how to continue.
How to continue, because one of the things that happens, if you're testing whether it works or has worked or not, and the answer is yes, it starts to make it possible to stop doing it, stop maintaining it. This will become a little clearer when we go on to the definition. Yes, Paul?
Yeah, I get a sense that working also indicates that it's something that I'm already doing, and it is working, so I can continue doing it.
So there's that presupposition. I see what you mean. Well, that's an interesting thought. Yeah. The thing that we really want to just remember or learn from this criterion is that it is an ongoing criterion. It presupposes something that is ongoing, which naturally supports maintaining a diet. Okay, doing something through a long period of time. You want a criterion that presupposes something that will be ongoing, rather than being an event or some goal to achieve. Now the definition, so what is working for him? What does he mean by that? He means, well, my blood is regulated and consistent. Okay? Now, what's interesting, what to you is interesting about that as a definition? Anything? What's interesting to you about that as a definition? How does that make sense? How does that support, let me put it this way, how does that support maintaining a diet?
It's almost like an affirmation.
Well, no, this is what he's evaluating. Is my blood regulated and consistent?
Okay.
Is my blood regulated and consistent?
The definition contains within it a test to make sure that it is an ongoing condition, it is working.
Right, so this is again, it's not, is my blood, suppose instead it was, is my blood perfect? Is my blood perfect? That's really different than, is it regulated or consistent? Regulated and consistent suggest or presuppose a range that he wants to keep it in. It doesn't have to be a certain way. It has to be operating within a range.
Isn't that evidence because it's a measurement? The way
No, this doesn't say how he's measuring it. It's just saying this doesn't say how he's measuring it, this doesn't say how he knows it's regulated and consistent. This just says if my blood is regulated and consistent, then that's what I mean by the diet is working. So so another thing that we want to bring up about this, that your question brings out, is that what he means by working is that a certain thing is going on inside of his body, rather than let's see, how do I put this? Well, maybe we save that for the evidence. I think it'll be clear when we talk about the evidence. The thing that we want to just point out about the definition here is that this is the experience that he wants. He calls that working. The experience he wants is that his blood is regulated and consistent. And the experience he wants is not one of getting to having his blood be a certain place, 70, or I don't know what the numbers are, or be perfect, or always right, but that he wants his blood to be operating within a certain range. And so it's that, you see, I think that makes it possible or supports maintaining his diet, because one of the things, if you think about, let's think about the other side of it. When do people have trouble staying on diets? One of the things that happens is they get on their diet and they're not losing weight the way they think they should. And so they get, they want a certain thing. I want to lose 5 pounds a week, right? And that's what my diet's working if I'm losing 5 pounds a week. And then I get to this point where I hit a plateau and I'm not losing 5 pounds a week. All right? Instead, I'm losing 3 pounds, or even losing 1 pound. But because my idea of the diet working is that I'm losing 5 pounds a week, and I'm only losing 1, I go, oh, the diet's not working. The diet's not working. Well, I guess it's no good. I'll give it up, and I need to try a different diet. That's different if, suppose instead you said, well, my diet's working if I am losing some weight each week. Well, now that creates a range or possibility for getting a lots of feedback that goes, yes, it's working, yes, it's working, yes, it's working. And that's reinforcing staying on the diet rather than giving you feedback that is discouraging to be on a diet.
And I think this is what seems is that it is realistic, because with the diabetic people, sometimes it's high, sometimes way high, which is dangerous, sometimes it's even low and it's dangerous. So
It is realistic, but we're talking about human beings, and the fact that it's realistic isn't what matters.
Numbers.
Right.
So if it goes up,
He doesn't have numbers,
yeah.
right. Well, let's get to the evidence.
But that also doesn't that also give you the option, if a diet is for life, you're not gonna lose 5 pounds a week for life. You can't do, so you want something in there that, like he says, my blood is regulated and consistent. You want something that my body is now, or is becoming, in support of my life goals, however you want to put it.
Well, so for
That
instance,
way it doesn't have
yeah,
to be losing weight, it'd be
I quite agree.
relationship with your body.
I quite agree. If we were adapting this, if we were adapting this model to, say, dieting, we perhaps might, if we were using that same criterion, it's working, we might want to define working as, it's working if, what I mean by working is that it's allowing me to live a healthy, energetic life. That means, that's how I know it's working. Okay? And so that provides a lot of range for things, for behavior and experiences and so on. Yeah. Okay. But in terms of the structure, I just want to make sure we get that. Again, it's an ongoing thing that provides a range. So instead of just getting yes, it is, no, it's not. It's no, it's not doing as well as I would like it to. I can move it back. I can move it forward. Okay. Now the evidence. So how does he know it's working? That is, how does he know his blood is regulated and consistent? Now this is quite interesting. He says, well, how do you know this, Lenny? He says, well, the way I know is I feel energetic, I'm conscious, and have clarity of mind. So his evidence, where is his evidence? It's in him. It's internal evidence. All right? Now, suppose instead it was external evidence. Suppose the way he knew his blood was regulated and consistent was, people tell me I'm looking good.
Well, what happens if they don't say that?
What happens if they don't say that? You know, the world might not cooperate. It's not consistent. It's not consistent. You can't depend on getting that kind of feedback. You can't regulate it yourself. You may be talking to somebody who just happens to be a jerk, and just, for whatever reason, they just want to, because it makes them feel better to put you down. They go, boy, you look horrible, not as good as me, and it has nothing to do with you. So in other words, what he wants to do is he wants to have his blood regulated and consistent. If he turns that over to the world just may not cooperate in giving him that kind of feedback. So one thing is it's internal, so he can have direct personal feedback on whether or not it's working. So that's one point. And if you think about lots of times when people are on diets to lose weight, they often do have as evidence external feedback. People tell them, they want people to tell them they look good or notice that they've lost weight. Their size of their dress goes down, things like that. The difficulty with that is that the difficulty of that is, as we said, the world may not cooperate, and you can get no's. You can get the world saying, no, it's not working because you haven't gone down in dress size, or I didn't say anything to you about you looking better. And then what happens is people get discouraged. They go, oh, the diet's not working. So why am I going through all this trouble? Why am I killing myself, to eat these foods and spend all this money and so on, when nobody's telling me I look good, or I haven't dropped a dress size? So that is a difficulty with, staying on anything that requires, through time, a commitment. So for Lenny, he needs to have something internal that is completely on is a direct feedback that he gets through his own experience. Now, another thing about this is it's ongoing evidence. I feel energetic, I'm conscious, and have clarity of mind. In testing for that, how often can he get yeses to his evidence? A lot, even perhaps most of the time. Do I have clarity of mind? Am I feeling energetic? Yes, 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 yes. Once in a while he might get a no, and that means he needs to do something. He needs to change something, what he's doing, and we'll talk about that in a minute in a strategy. But most of the time he gets yeses. If instead the evidence was some goal he wants to achieve, so for instance, what people often do in their dieting is they say, well, I want to lose 20 pounds. And that's how I will know the diet's worked. I've lost 20 pounds. So here I am, weighing what I weigh. Over there, in the future, is I've lost 20 pounds. So I'm doing all this work to diet, and I ask myself, have I lost 20 pounds? No. I'm still dieting. Have I lost 20 pounds? No. Have I lost 20 pounds? No. Have I lost 20 pounds? No. What do you get? You get no's all the way until you get to the final yes. Well, that's a lot of no's to get through. And people don't like no's. We don't like them. It feels bad. It is very discouraging. It's very discouraging. Instead, yes.
Well, for this evidence, there is, again, it's tested against itself, within itself, as opposed to I feel energetic and conscious, have clarity of mind compared to myself to 5 years ago when I was energetic. Always comparing it to himself and not to any other external.
That's right.
source.
That's right. He's always comparing it to himself. So this is, he not only can get immediate feedback, which is important if you're diabetic. You can't, your blood sugar starts dropping, for instance, he needs to do something about it now, not 3 hours from now. He gets immediate feedback. That's important as a diabetic, but as a more general point, it is, as Gene says, he gets his own, the feedback he gets, the evidence he has, resides in himself, so he's not dependent on the world around him, and it's ongoing, so he gets continual yeses and only occasional no's, rather than continual no's until he hopefully finally gets a yes sometime in the future. Okay? All right. Now, what the enabling cause effect. So Lenny, what makes it possible, what leads to or makes it possible for your diet to work, that is, for your blood to be regulated and consistent? And he says, well, you have to maintain focus and discipline. Maintain focus and discipline is what leads to working. Now, what's interesting to me about this is I think everybody here in the room would say, oh, well, yeah, that's obvious. We all know that. We all know that, if you're going to stay on a diet, you have to be disciplined, on the diet. Everybody knows that as information. Lenny has it as a belief. For him, it's real. For him, it is a belief, that's functioning as a presupposition of his experience that, yeah, you've got to maintain focus and discipline in order for things to work. For him, it's not just, something to say, information. So, I think that's what's significant about this is not what it is, but the fact that it is, for him, there's a real causal connection between that and the criterion, one that's palpable to him. And we will talk some more about that this afternoon when we talk about acquisition. So, the motivating cause effect, that is, why is it important that his blood be regulated and consistent, that his diet work? Lenny says, so I can have the life I want to have rather than the one I don't want to have. Now, this is a brilliant motivating cause effect he's got here. What's he doing here? He's representing to himself and holding both his idea about the future he wants to have and the future he doesn't want to have. And he's recognizing the causal connection between, if it works, it takes him to the future he wants to have. If it doesn't work, it takes him to the future did I say that right? Good. And if it doesn't work, it takes him to the future he doesn't want to have. Okay? Now, what's significant about that? How does that work? It's towards and away from, right? So he's going. So how is it useful to have towards and away from? Why not simply, for instance, have towards? Why is it important that my blood be regulated and consistent? So I can have the life I want to have. Why is it useful to have, or how is it useful to have this rather than the one I don't want to have?
Because one of it is, one of it is a no. The other one is a reminder that, it's a reminder that if he continues not maintaining, he'll get more no's, and that will result in consequences he doesn't want.
Yeah. I completely agree with that, Jim.
There's more energy if you're both being pulled and pushed at the same time.
Right. There is more energy in it. And if you try it out in your own experience, I think you'll find the same thing. As human beings, what we tend to get the most energy from is from avoiding that which is unpleasant. We can all say, wow, we wish it wasn't that way, but that seems to be the way we work. That we'll put a lot more energy into avoiding things that that are unpleasant in general than going towards things that are. So there's just and you check this out in your own experience, and you'll decide whether or not that's true for you or not. But it is the case that we get a tremendous kick from avoiding something unpleasant. That's very motivating. However, you don't want to just run screaming into the night away from that which you don't want. You want to have some place to go. And so that's how it's useful to have something to avoid and to have what it is you're going towards, because you get the energy, the motivation from avoiding something. You also get the direction of where it is you want to go. Where you want to go, of course, does pull you. It's just that the strength of the pull is not generally as much and sustaining as avoiding that which we find unpleasant. So it's very useful, it's brilliant to have both of these things. And you'll see when we get to the strategy how this reappears and plays another role in the strategy as well. Yes, Anwar.
I could understand that it is more powerful than just saying the life I want to have.
Mm-hmm. Yes. So you can understand that that's more powerful. Yeah.
Say if we say just the life I have.
Uh-huh. The life I have.
And that's it. Not mentioning the life that I don't want.
Okay, Anwar, let's try this again.
Okay. Here
So,
we have both.
yes, the life I want to have, the life I don't want to have.
If we just choose the life that I want to have,
Yes.
it won't be that powerful as
The life I want to have, it won't be that powerful?
just that, not
No.
mentioning the life that I don't want.
No, it won't be as powerful. I'll just say that categorically. It won't be as powerful. It'll be wonderful, and oftentimes, in the moment, it's just, oh, that's what I want. But does that have the ability to sustain you over time? Do you keep that same level of energy connected to it through time? And the answer is, in general, no. You have to have we do things, of course, to try and keep that vision or that future in our presence, in our experience, to keep revivifying that. But you'll try this out in your own experience. If you test out in your own experience those times when those areas in your life where you are doing things to avoid unpleasantness, and those that you are doing things to move towards what you want, what is pleasant, and find out which you're more consistent at doing and what you're more motivated to do. I think you'll find that moving away from unpleasantness is more motivating. Now, okay, so some other good points here, because this is a fascinating structure operating here. What happens? Well, let's make this a little more tangible for Lenny here. We talk about this next point. The doctor made it very clear to him what his future would be. He said, if you don't regulate your blood, if you don't control your diabetes, you'll go blind, you'll lose your feet, and then you'll lose your penis. This got Lenny's attention, So he goes, well, there's a future. So when he's talking about the future I don't want to have, that's what he's looking at. He's looking at being blind in a wheelchair with no penis, So he's, there's some juice in that, For some of us, there's some juice in that. So, but now suppose it was, because there is so much juice, why do we even need this, the life I want to have? Simply, I want my blood regulated and consistent so that I don't have that future I don't want to have. What happens to you when you are just holding what you're wanting to avoid? What happens when you're holding only what you want to avoid, even though it's strong? There's no focus, but what does it do to you? It doesn't feel good. It doesn't feel good, does it? To be always kicking yourself with, oh, I don't want that, I don't want that. It doesn't feel good. And so pretty soon what happens is, now we want to avoid tormenting ourselves with that unpleasant future. So now we want to go away from that. And so we end up going into denial, I'll, put it out of your mind. Oh, it's not really going to happen to me, as a way of avoiding the unpleasantness of facing that unpleasant future. Does that make sense to you, what I'm saying? So that's one of the reasons that it's not useful simply to try and, whip yourself into behavior with unpleasantness, because after a while you just go, well, I'm just going to avoid the whole context, because I don't enjoy being whipped. But there is a lot of juice in that. What you want to have instead is both the juice from avoiding the unpleasantness, but the relief, the joy, the optimism, and I don't know, the inspiration of what it is you're moving towards as well, so that it's not just living this. I'm going through this horrible ordeal to avoid unpleasantness, but I'm going through this ordeal, avoiding this unpleasantness, and it's in service of something that I really want, that's really important to me. Okay, I think we said enough about that. All right, one more thing in the belief land here. There's one supporting belief that I captured. At one point he just said, you know, it won't work by itself, I have to be present. And you know, this struck me as an important supporting belief. Of course, you know, you can see that reflected in the cause-effect up here. You have to maintain focus and discipline for it to work. But here it came out in a very pithy, strong way. It won't work by itself. The diet won't work by itself. I have to be present. This present also reflects the fact that he's got an ongoing evidence. So it's always about being in the present. And I think this is a very essential belief. A lot of folks, if you think about, if any of you have dieted or gone through dieting, we tend to relate to the diet as though it's the diet that does the work. And if I don't lose weight, then it wasn't a good diet. I need a different diet. You know, and that's how they make a lot of money in those women's magazines every week. You know, every week, the last diet you'll ever need. Every week. Eat everything you want and lose weight. You know, every week they've got another diet. And one of the reasons that that's possible is that a lot of people don't believe that. They think it's the diet that does the work. And so if you're not losing weight, then it must be the diet's not good, right? So this to me is an essential supporting belief, to recognize that it's not the diet. You know, whatever diet you stay on, it probably will probably have an impact. That what's really significant or makes the difference is you being present in the pursuing of it. You have to pursue it. You have to maintain focus and discipline. And that's what makes it work. Okay. All right?
May I make one comment on that? I think you hit it right at the end, is the present, more meaning that I have to sort of consciously pursue this activity. To me, the word present kind of is just a little bit of cloudy.
Well, you weren't there with him. When he talks about being present, what he means is that you have to have an ongoing awareness of what's going on with you in your experience, in your body, how you're responding. What's going on in your experience.
Okay.
That's what he means by being present.
Being present in the process.
Yeah.
Tending to the process.
Tending to
Tending to
yourself.
the process, right.
Yeah, tending to yourself. See, remember, you know, what he's paying attention to as evidence is, am I energetic? Do I have consciousness and clarity of mind? You know, that's how he's knowing whether or not his diet's working. He's not doing it by, you know, sticking himself and testing his blood, or he's not doing it by people telling him, oh, you look good. He's doing it by how do I feel? So to know how you're feeling, you have to be present. You have to be in your own presence, I guess. All right. Let's just take just a couple minutes just to stop talking and just take a little breath, okay? And then we'll finish it off.